Ryan Coogler's new film, Sinners, is great. This video is not like a review. My review is go see it in a theater. This is going to be an analysis of Sinners with a kind of weird structure. See, one of the coolest things about Sinners is that there's an obvious direction this movie could have gone in that would have been worse. Like, I thought I had figured out what the movie was doing, and then Coogler made a bunch of decisions that were way more interesting than what I expected. So, before I talk about what I think Sinners is about, let's go into what it's not about. There's this incredible sequence in Sinners that everyone is correctly going nuts over. Sammy plays the blues so well it summons spirits from the past and future, griots and funk guitarists in this incredible tribute to hundreds of years of African and African-American music, and at that moment, the vampires show up, drawn to the music's power. The vampire coven at this point is 3 white people, and following vampire rules, they have to be invited in, so they show up as musicians and say, hey, we heard your music, we love it, and we have money, we'd love to play some music with you, and we'll pay you, let us in. And then they play this blues song in a way that's clearly goofy, like the vibe is they have technical skill but not real passion. And at this point, I thought I got the concept of the movie, like, vampires as cultural appropriation. White people who are drawn to the energy and perceived authenticity of African American music, but want to buy their way into that feeling without being part of the culture. The vampire leader Remick does this hilarious, like, post-racial, aren't we all just one big family thing? Like, he's a performative liberal trying to get permission to rap. I figured the characters would face the same dilemma as historically a lot of African-American artists. How much do you cater to white audiences who could give you more commercial success, but inviting them in might change this sense of community? This would all fit with what vampires usually symbolize. A vampire is someone without vitality of their own who steals it from someone else. Vampire stories are often about humanity, like emotion and sexuality and life essence being turned into something material that can be extracted. Vampires have been linked with money ever since Dracula bought his way to London. So taking something transcendent like music and making it something you can buy and sell would be classic vampire stuff. I wouldn't hate this as a concept for a movie. Like, some people online have assumed this is what the movie does and gotten mad at, like, oh, the message is just white people are bad. But I don't think it's a hot take that this is a thing that's happened in history. As old blues man Delta Slim points out, white people love the blues. They just don't like who makes it. So, yeah, vampires as gentrifiers. That was the premise of Vampires versus the Bronx. Like, sure. That's why it was so interesting to later realize that's not what the movie's about. Those themes are present, but in a much more complicated way, and I just don't think Remick and his group represent appropriation or gentrification, like, at all. There's something very, very different going on. For one, Remick's claim that his coven offers equality and a certain kind of freedom seems sincere. The vampires share memories, but everyone seems to retain their own personality. Cornbread is still his goofy self. He just eats people. And we catch up with Mary and Stack decades later, and they seem in control of themselves. Remick is not consuming these people. He seems to really be recruiting them into a non-hierarchical community where everyone is welcome and you can live forever, and he's the one who lets them know the Klan is coming and says, hey, you join me, we could take care of them right now. Like, as creepy as he is, I'm glad to see a lot of viewers agree, Remick is the most persuasive of vampires ever been in fiction. The deal he offers is legitimately appealing. And yeah, he's really not racist, which is such an interesting choice. Like, am I wrong that this is counterintuitive? When a movie's set in the Jim Crow South with black protagonists pitted against a white vampire, it feels obvious that the vampire would represent racism, but in this interview, Ryan Coogler just says it.
Yeah, he's not racist at all. You know?
The first thing we're told about Remick is that he's not what he seems. The protagonists and the audience are worried that a white guy in the South is going to be linked with the Klan or trying to destroy their community. But as Coogler has put it, Remick is way older than modern racial categories. He He sees the bullshit of American racism. He is a villain. He's manipulative and untrustworthy, but there's more common ground between him and the protagonist than there seems, and I do think that in his weird way, he views himself as trying to save these people. It's so significant that Remick is Irish. And not just that he's part of a community that was not always considered white, but one known for storytelling and making music. The Irish are specifically mentioned in the introduction, along with Choctaw and West African cultures, for having this artistic power. Coogler is, in his words, obsessed with Irish folk music. I've been watching a lot of Ryan Coogler interviews, okay? He's a cool guy. And he's talked about direct parallels between Irish and African American communities using music to express themselves under oppression. Which brings me to that other incredible sequence in the film, when the vampires sing Rocky Road to Dublin. How cool is this movie that I can say, oh, the vampire dances an Irish jig, and I'm talking about one of the most captivating moments in the film? I've heard some people say this scene shows Remick does just want to control people, that he's forcing his thralls to dance along to his music. I don't think that's quite right. The scene is unsettling, but I think if the takeaway was supposed to be that these are mindless creatures dancing to a song they don't really like, the music would be less good. Like, the main thing about this scene is that it slaps. For all the great music in this film, Rocky Road to Dublin is what's been stuck in my head for a week. And that's what really threw a wrench into my initial view of this film. These vampires are not shambling around, lacking the sauce, trying to steal rhythm from black artists. Say what you like about him, Remick has sauce. These vampires are partying. Their art is fun and exciting. I think they put 808s on that song. They don't have Sammy's gift to bring back spirits from beyond, and Remick makes it clear he wants access to that gift, but it's not because they lack passion. So the vampires have art. Their art is thrilling and joyful and comes from an ancient artistic culture. So what's missing? If that's what Sinners is not about, what is it actually trying to say? I think it's really important to Sinners that the music Sammy makes is also considered sinful in his culture. This aspect can maybe be underappreciated. These days in modern America, most stories about art are about how it's a good thing. We think it's great to express yourself and be creative. And I think Coogler also views art as good, but this movie reflects a culture that had a very different view of art, where its power was viewed as dangerous and untrustworthy. The blues was called the devil's music. Coogler calls the Delta blues a kind of twin sibling to gospel music, but while gospel is made for the soul, meant to elevate the listener, blues is made for the soul and body, acknowledging and sometimes celebrating our moral failings. Sammy's father wants him to give up this sinful music and glorify God, and the movie does not endorse Sammy's father's view, but I don't think it totally condemns it. The point of those scenes is not to say, like, Sammy needs to free himself of this utterly backwards culture. The very last post-credit scene seems to deny that for sure. This is a movie about dangerous art, about how art is powerful and not always in a good way. So here's how I'd put it. Remember when I said vampire stories are all about taking something transcendent and making it material? I thought music was the transcendent thing that vampires would make material, but music is already material. Especially the blues. It is of this earth. It is something humans make. Maybe music can touch the transcendent, but in fact, music is, in a way, that unholy process of bringing something transcendent to Earth. Music is the thing that turns love and community and sexuality and sadness into something you can hear, something that can manipulate people, something that can be bought and sold. Smoke and Stack sincerely appreciate Sammy's gift, but they're also trying to use him to make money. Sammy is trying to use his talent to get laid. That sense of community in the juke joint is something deliberately created so people don't care how much they're spending. Often in the film, music conceals the sounds of violence. It hides one of the guests being beaten up and hides Stack being turned into a vampire. So at its best, music can touch this divine realm, but music itself is something earthly. And Remek's whole deal is expressed in his last confrontation with Sammy. He doesn't believe in the divine or transcendent. I'm using sort of vague terms like the transcendent because I don't think Coogler is like endorsing a particular religion, though it is interesting that with a few tweaks, this could be a really Christian movie. The main villain is explicitly anti-Christian. Remek thinks the words of the Lord's Prayer can be comforting, but they're just words. There's no heaven, no afterlife, and no rules sent from on high. There's no difference between man and beast. We're all just flesh with no purpose beyond pleasure and survival. The contrary perspective is that there is something more. Coogler doesn't commit. Maybe that's religion, Christianity, or the folk practices of Annie, or maybe culture is the extra thing that's important, connecting yourself to the past and future, or maybe it's just like basic morality, but there's something more, and at its best, music can reach whatever that something is. Put it this way, music is like a way of feeling what it's like in heaven on earth for just a little while, but if you don't believe in heaven, music is all there is. So the vampires have art. They're obsessed with art. Their life is one big party full of music. What Remek offers is hedonism, the choice to embrace the material world, material pleasures and power, and not care about anything greater. Does that tie in to specific ideas about like African American artists and white audiences, the tension between making money and preserving culture, the Faustian bargain of assimilation? Yeah, like it does. Those are themes of the movie, but approached from this much more fundamental perspective, the choice we all face between the material world and higher responsibility. And because Coogler is a great filmmaker whose blockbuster style has always included uncommon subtlety, he doesn't try to dictate to the audience that one choice is right with no downside. Instead, by having twin protagonists, he can metaphorically show the outcome of both paths. Smoke stays human, and what he gets for doing things the right way is dying in the dirt. The final confrontation with the clan is sick as hell, but it's also obviously doomed, and I think you're kind of supposed to think, man, if he accepted becoming a vampire, he could have cleaned this up no problem. In one interview, Coogler pointed out something that really shook me.
What if the vampires didn't show up? What happens to those people?
For all the problems the vampires caused, if they hadn't showed up, everyone in the juke joint would have died anyway. Power comes with a cost, but the reality of life under oppression is that lacking power has a terrible cost too. But Smoke ends up reunited with his love and daughter in the afterlife, if you believe in that sort of thing. Meanwhile, when we catch up with Stack decades later, his existence doesn't seem terrible. He has wealth, the coolest, incredibly 90s outfit money can buy, and he's with Haley Steinfeld for eternity, which is not bad. But he can't see the sunrise ever again. Neither of them are free, not for more than a moment. The vampires can party, but they've given up any connection to their ancestors or descendants. There's an empty crib in the house of the couple Remek turns first. Remek is hungry for the feeling inside the juke joint. He wants Sammy's soul. He wants to see these spirits, but that feeling depends on believing in something more than the material world. Saying there's no afterlife and no meaning to any of this is why Remek can't see those spirits. He has music, but it's just music. It's just entertainment. Part of what I'm saying is, maybe the magic wasn't just inside Sammy. It's not like a superpower he has. If Remek merged minds with him, he wouldn't acquire it. The magic is in the juke joint. It's in the community that cares for each other. The magic of culture is in the way people care about those other than themselves, including those in the past and future. For all their talk of fellowship and love, the vampires don't have a community in the same way. They all share memories and they're all immortal. There's no disagreements. There's no difference, which means there's no such thing as a connection between different people. No sacrificing for others, none of the complexity of being alive, the sadness and pain and desire to ease someone else's burden that causes great art to emerge and to evolve. I think it's significant that Remek says, he wants Sammy's gift to see his people again. He misses people of the past, but he has no interest in the future. because he intends to live forever. He doesn't want descendants who might do something different. But real culture relies on feeling in community with people you haven't met, people you'll never meet, laying the foundation for future generations to innovate in ways you'll have no control over. Remick is culture as pure nostalgia. He just wants to see the things he likes, see the same things over again. He won't make anything imperfect and weird and new that might set the stage for something greater. He just wants the same songs. Great songs, but they get repetitive. I don't know, that's what I was thinking about when watching the movie, and it's just much more interesting than what I initially thought the film was doing. Honestly, I'm disappointed in myself. I think a lot of people will have made the same assumptions I did, but they come from a pretty narrow-minded place. I shouldn't look at a film from a black director and assume it'll be all a heavy-handed racism metaphor. The racism in this film is not metaphorical. The vampires don't represent the Klan. The Klan is the Klan, tangible and a fact of life. The injustice of the setting is the context for everything the characters do. It's part of their lives and essential to the story, but it's not what their lives are about. And so I shouldn't make these assumptions, but I like that Coogler seems to set this simple interpretation up and then goes out of his way to make things more complicated. And I really like that he shows Remick also comes from an artistic culture. I'm not sure how to phrase this. I don't want to sound like I'm saying, let's not forget, white people have culture too. What I mean is, the simpler version of this movie I had imagined, it's like fair as a historical metaphor to depict African American culture being stolen by people with no culture of their own. Art is not obligated to be completely nuanced. But it's so much more interesting to make it not about one culture having meaning another lacks, but to highlight how the craving for power makes culture in general meaningless. Similarly, I like that Coogler highlights that even under legal segregation, these communities could be more diverse than we'd think. The juke joint includes Mississippi Delta Chinese and white-passing African American people, and the blend of cultures summoned by Sammy's playing is complicated. The film does not view culture as something with clear boundaries within defined ethnic groups, which makes sense. I mean, the music for this film is made by one of the whitest guys. I guess I just think saying a specific group of people is magic can be dehumanizing as well, and I'm glad Coogler made a more complex film than that. I tend to not love the elevated horror trend. At its worst, it's a lot of normal horror stories with a serious metaphor on top. The monster is trauma. The ghost is depression. But the story itself is pretty straightforward. Sinners does a ton of classic horror tropes, but with a way weirder story structure. And its serious themes are used in a really unique way. And I could be reading too much into it, or I could be wrong. This film opens itself to a lot of different interpretations. I'd love to hear yours. I didn't even talk about the stuff with Smoke and Stack's dad, or the historic connections between the Choctaw and both the Irish and African Americans, or that vampire stories were basically invented by Irish people. The big criticism of this film is that it's overstuffed and doesn't quite come together. And I think that's fair, but I like that. I think it's good art when you make something that's compelling and clearly meaningful, but without a straightforward explanation. Coogler has talked about how this is his first film, not based on a true story or existing IP. I like that this movie feels like it's everything Ryan Coogler specifically loves. It's got the blues and complicated metaphors about art and direct references to 80s horror classics and emotionally painful character arcs and heavy metal riffs and dance numbers and way more conversations about cunnilingus than I expected. Thank God we got Ryan Coogler out of PG-13 movies so we could see that this man is a freak. Sorry, that's like all I had to say. I guess what I'm saying is Sinners is like deeply indebted to all these different influences, but also completely unique, which is to say Sinners feels like art that's in conversation with both the past and future. This movie is so far really financially successful and good. I want Ryan Coogler to get like Nolan-sized blank checks from here on out. I cannot wait to see what this guy does next.